So we've got another crazy feat from Saitama because he is straight up breaking reality once again in the new chapter. So as we saw before, Empty Void can like jump out of the causality of the universe and slash at it directly with what he calls a dimensional slash from his dimensional blade. And when he does it in this chapter, Saitama just straight up stops it with like his index finger and thumb and then pulls Empty Void from outside of the universe back down into it. Pretty wild stuff. But of course, we'll get to that because there's other stuff that happens. I had to kind of skip around to get to the juicy stuff in the beginning of the video. You know, TikTok generation, attention span, and all that stuff. But anyway, coming off of the previous chapter, Empty Void was able to get the upper hand on Blast and slashed him up and took off his right hand as well. He's wasting no time and just speed blitzes his sword right into Blast's chest. And he makes some small talk with Blast, saying that he heard that he had become the #1 S-Class hero, but then he says that he's always been irresponsible, preaching ideals and bringing disasters to those around him. Pretty interesting that he says that, and we'll get more into that towards the end of the chapter because I think I know what that means. And going more into that, he's like, so who have you managed to protect, huh? You have a kid, don't you? The kid he's referring to is actually the leader of the Neo Heroes, Blue, who we were introduced a couple chapters back. This straight up confirms that he is, in fact, the son of Blast, and he's, like, not lying about it, just in case anybody was curious. But as he's gloating here, Flashy Flash finally comes in, trying to help Blast by taking off Empty Void's head. But of course, he is easily able to avoid this because Empty Void is at a level way higher than Flashy Flash. At this point, I think it's safe to say that he is a disaster level god being, and Flashy Flash at best is like above Dragon. Then in retaliation, he just slashes Flashy Flash. Realistically, he could have just Sukuna'd him, but, you know, he's not supposed to die at this point in the story, if, you know, die at all ever. But then Sonic comes in with his Windblade kick, but for some reason Empty Void just decides to hop out of the causality of the universe. You know, like his special jutsu thing that he can do. And his rationale is like, yeah, I would have enjoyed tormenting you directly rather than slicing you from afar, but that will do. I'm done with this nonsense. I guess he's just speed running to kill them, even though he could have just did it there. But I get it. We need to have this sequence play out the way that it does because of what happens. So yeah, as expected, he hops out and then tries to end them all with one quick dimension slash. But this is where Saitama comes in because he is just randomly near them in the forest. And he's with Monako and he's like, what's this? Just holding a freaking dimensional blade with his index finger and thumb. And Empty Void's like, what? There's nothing that can stop the tip of the dimension blade, which cuts through space itself. So that's fascinating, and we kind of knew that, but it's just, you know, of course, nice to be confirmed here. But it also brings me back to Sukuna, because as I said, Empty Void could have just easily Sukuna'd Flashy Flash, which I mean just, you know, cut through him like butter. But another thing with Sukuna is that, you know, towards the end of the series, he gains this ability to where he can cut through space itself. And that's like the ultimate move in Jujutsu Kaisen. There's like no one that can stop that. But as we see, that's not really anything to Saitama. And then it made me wonder, like, oh, it would be really cool to see Saitama do this to Sukuna. Like if Sukuna fired off a world-cutting slash at him and he just grabbed it with his index finger and thumb, I assume Sukuna would just submit at that point. Not like a coward, but just accepting that, oh, this guy is God and I am not. I accept a honorable death. But Empty Void, on the other hand, not looking for an honorable death here, and he just tries another dimensional slash against Saitama, but he just grabs that one too. And then he pulls Empty Void from outside of the universe back down into it and slams him into the ground. Amazing sequence. This is also an homage to the original sequence from the webcomic. Very different continuity, of course. Empty Void was way depowered in that version, and we don't really see him do anything. Saitama kind of just off-screens him, and he winds up in a human-shaped hole the way that he is in the manga as well. But then we see that Saitama has Empty Void's two-dimensional blades. So what's going to happen with these things is I'm pretty sure he's going to give one to Flashy Flash and one to Sonic. And this will be their pathway to their next power-up. Since Empty Void refers to these things as dimension blades, it's very possible he might need them to use that technique. So it's possible that Flashy Flash and Sonic may use these things to either eventually get to the cosmic level of power or be able to defend against beings on that level. But speaking of them, they go right after Empty Void after he loses the blades. And he's like, oh, okay, well, check this out. And then he does his little jutsu, but Blast is like, nah, you're not getting away. and he puts his left hand through one of his portals and it connects with his severed right hand on the ground so that he can activate his singularity. Awesome sequence here. And as he's doing that, he like permeates into Empty Void because apparently he's trying to fuse with him, which I didn't know Blast can do this, but I'm sure there's tons of things Blast can do that we're not aware of yet. And Blast is like, if we fuse like this, our biological structures will be torn apart. And he said, Sitch, I'm counting on you. And then we get this little flashback of when Blast was talking to Sitch. And he says, in case everything else fails, I'll just fuse with him. And then, I'll come back to the Monster Association and then use the monster cell separation technology on him. It's okay if you prioritize his life. So Blast willing to just give his life so that they could bring Empty Void back to being a human. And it makes sense because Empty Void is the only chance that they really have at stopping God at this point, since it's very likely that he is the only one who has the ability to open the place where God is currently hiding or trapped or whatever. But the fusion doesn't work out because the quote-unquote power of light repelled Blast. As we've seen these last couple chapters, God's power is referred to the power of light and Blast's power is referred to the power of dark. But after they separate, Blast gained some of Empty Void's memories because their consciousness overlapped. And we see the moment when Empty Void found the God Cube and was tricked by him. And the vision that God showed him to manipulate him, which, of course is God's MO. He impersonates someone else to trick them to accept his influence. It was apparently Blast's wife. And that's where the chapter ends. And of course, this raises a whole bunch of questions. So first of all, who is this person to Empty Void? But before I even get into that, let me just acknowledge we're finally seeing Blast's wife. We never knew about this or anything. We just knew that Blast's son was blue, but we didn't know anything else. Now we're finally seeing his wife. And judging by this, I'm assuming that this is Empty Void's sister. I mean, you could also take away from this sequence that maybe they're like in a love triangle or something, but I don't think that's the case. I wouldn't be mad if that was what's going on, but I think it's more likely that this is Empty Void's sister and Blast is responsible for her death. Because, early on in the chapter, Empty Void's like, you've always been like this, irresponsibly preaching ideals and bringing disaster to those around you. So who have you managed to protect? You have a kid, don't you? All of that makes me think that this is Empty Void's sister who married Blast, or I'm just saying they're married. I'm just assuming they are, but got together with Blast and made Blue. So if this is true, I guess this means that Blue is way more powerful than we thought, because the implication here is that he has Blast's abilities and maybe even Empty Void's abilities as well, which is insane. Also, if you look at little Blue's hand, he has that circle thing that Blast does. So it's like baby Blue wearing a suit as a baby? Does he have to wear the suit, or is that just a part of his biology now? Not really sure, but let me know what you think about all this stuff in the comments, guys. A lot to talk about. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.